Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Wanderer and watched the impossible. 3 alien warships hung in space before them, each one larger than a city block. Their hulls glowed with patterns of light that hurt to look at directly. Strange sounds came through the communication systems, sounds that made his teeth ache and his bones vibrate. "Sir, they're not attacking," said Lieutenant Amy Carter from her position at the science station. Her voice carried a note of confusion that Jake understood completely. The alien ships had been doing this dance for 6 hours now. They moved in complex patterns, fired bursts of energy that created brilliant displays in the void, and filled every communication channel with what could only be described as organized noise. But they weren't shooting at each other. Not really. Jake had seen real combat during the Mars uprising 15 years ago. He knew what weapons looked like when they were meant to kill. These energy bursts were something else entirely. They were too predictable, too carefully aimed at. Empty space, too beautiful to be instruments of death. "Captain," called Communications Officer Ben Hayes from across the bridge, "I'm getting multiple transmissions. The Universal Translator is having trouble, but I think they're trying to tell us something about honor and strength and proving worth." Jake nodded slowly. First contact protocols were clear. Observe, learn, don't interfere. Above all, don't make assumptions about alien behavior based on human understanding. What looked like a battle to human eyes might be something completely different to minds that had evolved under foreign stars. The largest of the 3 ships was clearly from a different species than the other 2. Its hull was smooth and dark, broken by lines of blue light that pulsed in steady rhythms. The other 2 ships belonged to the same race, their surfaces covered in crystalline growths that caught and reflected the energy bursts in spectacular cascades of color. Amy turned from her instruments. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildups, but the targeting systems don't make sense. If they were really trying to destroy each other, their hit probability should be near 100% at this range. Instead, it's closer to 0. "Are they fighting or not?" Jake asked. "I don't think so, sir. At least not the way we understand fighting." Jake walked to the main view screen and studied the alien vessels. The dark ship fired another burst of energy, this one a spiraling helix of golden light that passed harmlessly between the 2 crystal ships. In response, the crystal ships created a complex pattern of reflected beams that painted geometric shapes across their opponent's hull. It was beautiful. It was intricate. It was completely pointless as far as Jake could tell. "Ben, are you getting anything useful from their transmissions?" "Some words are coming through clearly now, sir. Honor, strength, glory, dominance. But also ritual, ceremony, tradition. I think this might be some kind of formal combat with rules we don't understand." "Or theater," Amy added quietly. Jake looked at her. "Explain." "Well, sir, what if this isn't really combat at all? What if it's a performance? Look at the energy signatures. Every burst is designed for maximum visual impact with minimum actual damage. The timing is too perfect, the movements too choreographed. This feels like a dance." As if to prove her point, the 3 alien ships suddenly broke formation and moved into a triangular pattern. The dark ship rotated slowly, while the crystalled ships orbited around it, trailing streams of colored light. The effect was stunning, like watching living art painted across the stars. "Captain," Ben said urgently, "we're being hailed. All 3 ships are trying to communicate with us now." "Put it through." The bridge filled with a mixture of sounds. Deep, resonant tones from the dark ship blended with crystalline chimes from the other 2. The Universal Translator worked frantically to make sense of the alien languages. "Welcome, new species. You arrive at a time of great showing. We demonstrate our strength and honor before the galaxy watches. You must declare your intent. Will you join the dance of power? Will you show your worth through glorious conflict?" Jake exchanged glances with his senior officers. First contact with not 1 but apparently 3 different alien species, and their first question was whether humans wanted to fight. "Sir?" Ben prompted quietly. Jake thought about Earth's instructions. Learn about alien cultures. Establish peaceful relationships. Represent humanity with dignity and wisdom. Nothing in the manual had prepared him for being invited to participate in what appeared to be ritualized combat. Tell them we are honored by their invitation, Jake said carefully. But humans prefer to observe and learn before taking action. We would like to understand their customs better. Ben transmitted the message. The response came back immediately, translated into English that carried undertones of confusion and perhaps disappointment. You choose to watch? This is your strength? Your honor comes from silence? Apparently so, Jake replied. The alien ships held their positions for several long minutes. Jake could imagine frantic conversations taking place between the three species as they tried to understand humanity's response. Finally, the dark ship spoke again. You are strange, humans. But strangeness can be its own form of power. We will continue our demonstration. Watch and learn how strong species prove their worth. What followed was the most elaborate display Jake had ever witnessed. The three ships moved through a complex series of maneuvers that combined elements of ballet, fireworks, and mock combat. Energy weapons fired in precise sequences that created temporary sculptures of light. The ships themselves became brushes, painting masterpieces across the canvas of space. Amy recorded everything, her instruments capturing data on alien technology, tactics, and cultural practices. Ben worked to decode the deeper meanings behind the transmissions. The entire crew watched in fascination as humanity's first contact with galactic civilization unfolded as a cosmic art performance. After 2 hours, the display ended. The alien ships moved apart and took up positions that suggested the ceremony was complete. Captain, Amy said softly, I don't think they understand us at all. Jake nodded. The aliens had expected humans to participate in their ritual of strength. Instead, humanity had chosen to watch quietly from the sidelines. To alien minds accustomed to proving worth through displays of power, human restraint must seem baffling. Maybe that's not entirely bad, Jake said. Sometimes being misunderstood can be an advantage. He didn't know how right he was. Commander Ben Hayes walked through the corridors of Crossroads Station and tried not to stare at his alien colleagues. 3 months had passed since first contact, and humanity had been invited to join the Galactic Research Initiative. The station was a marvel of cooperative engineering, built by 12 different species working together to push the boundaries of science. At least, that was the theory. Dr. Kate Russell fell into step beside him, her tablet clutched in her hands. As the station's lead psychologist, she had been documenting the cultural differences between species for weeks. Her findings were troubling. Ben, we have another problem in Lab 7, she said quietly. The Vorthan research team challenged the crystalline delegation to a proof of intellect this morning. Ben stopped walking. What does that mean exactly? Near as I can tell, it means they're going to have a formal debate that will probably end with someone getting their feelings hurt and demanding satisfaction through ritualized combat. Ben rubbed his temples. Every day brought new examples of how differently the galaxy approached problem-solving. When humans disagreed about research methods, they discussed options and found compromises. When aliens disagreed, they seemed to default to elaborate contests of dominance. They entered Lab 7 to find chaos. 6 Vorthan scientists stood on one side of the room, their tall forms radiating heat waves that made the air shimmer. On the other side, 4 members of the crystalline hive had arranged themselves in a geometric pattern, their faceted bodies reflecting light in angry flashes. Between them stood Dr. Amy Carter, still wearing her lab coat and looking completely out of place in what appeared to be preparation for formal combat. The humans will judge, announced War Leader Korth, the senior Vorthan. They are neutral in this conflict. We accept their judgment, chimed the crystalline spokesperson in harmonious tones that somehow managed to sound threatening. Amy caught sight of Ben and Kate entering the lab. Her expression clearly said, "Help me." But protocol demanded that humans not interfere in alien cultural practices. What seems to be the problem? Ben asked carefully. The crystallines claim their data analysis method is superior, Korth explained, his voice carrying the deep rumble that meant Vorthans were preparing for confrontation. We have challenged this claim. Now we must prove through contest Which approach deserves dominance? Actually, Amy said, I was just suggesting that maybe we could combine both methods and see if we get better results. The silence that followed was deafening. Korth stared at Amy as if she had suggested something obscene. Combine? You mean share dominance? Well, yes. Your heat-based analysis is really good at detecting certain molecular patterns, and their crystalline resonance method picks up structures that thermal scanning misses. If we use both techniques together, we could probably solve this protein folding problem in half the time. The crystalline spokesperson's facets dimmed and brightened. In what Kate had learned was equivalent to confused blinking. This is not how scientific disputes are resolved. One method must prove superior. The other must submit to the victor. But why? Amy asked. If both methods work, why not use both? Ben watched the alien scientists struggle with this concept. In the months since humans had joined the Galactic community, similar scenes had played out dozens of times. Humans instinctively looked for win-win solutions, while aliens seemed hardwired to view every disagreement as a contest with winners and losers. Because, Korth said slowly, as if explaining something obvious to a child, strength must be proven. Dominance must be established. This is how advancement happens. Kate stepped forward. As the station's psychologist, she had been trying to understand these cultural differences for weeks. But what if advancement could happen faster through cooperation? Impossible, the crystalline speaker chimed. Competition drives evolution. Without contest, there is no growth. Actually, Amy said, pulling up data on her workstation, since we started the joint research projects last month, we've made more breakthroughs than the previous 6 months combined. She displayed the results on the main screen. The alien scientists studied the data with obvious confusion. The numbers were clear. Mixed human-alien teams consistently outperformed single-species groups. This must be some form of human trickery, Korth muttered. Or advanced warfare, added the crystalline. Perhaps humans use psychological manipulation to weaken opponents. Ben exchanged glances with Kate. This was the third time this week that successful human collaboration had been interpreted as a form of subtle attack. It's not trickery, Ben said patiently. We just think problems are easier to solve when everyone works together. But how do you determine hierarchy? Korth demanded. Who has dominance in your teams? Nobody, Amy replied. We just figure out who's best at what and let them handle their area of expertise. The aliens seem to find this concept almost incomprehensible. Kate made more notes on her tablet. She was beginning to suspect that the galaxy's approach to cooperation was fundamentally different from humanity's. Engineer Sam Torres entered the lab, carrying a toolkit. Behind him walked Communications Officer Nina Bell, deep in conversation, with 2 aliens Kate didn't recognize. Hey, Amy, Sam called out. We figured out that power fluctuation problem in the quantum resonance chamber. Turns out the Zephyrian harmonic generators and the Thrakari gravity wells were interfering with each other. But if we adjust the frequencies just right, they actually amplify each other instead. That's great, Amy said. See? Another example of different technologies working better together. Nina nodded enthusiastically. The Zephyrians were really excited about it. They said they'd never thought of using their sound-based systems to enhance gravity manipulation. The Vorthon and crystalline scientists watched this exchange with growing bewilderment. Sam and Nina were discussing a technical breakthrough that involved 3 different alien technologies working in harmony. To human minds, this was simply good engineering. To alien minds raised on the necessity of dominance hierarchies, it looked like impossible magic. How do you do this? The crystalline speaker asked quietly. How do you make different systems work together without determining which is superior? Sam shrugged. We just try different combinations until we find something that works better than the original parts. But this violates the natural order, Korth protested. In nature, the strong dominate the weak. The superior method replaces the inferior. This is how progress happens. Kate looked up from her notes. She had been documenting these conversations for weeks, and a pattern was emerging. The aliens weren't naturally more aggressive than humans. They were following rules they believed were fundamental laws of existence. What if the natural order is more complex than that, she asked. What if the strongest approach is actually the one that finds ways to use everything available? The room fell silent again. Ben could see the alien scientists struggling with concepts that challenged their basic worldview. To them, cooperation without dominance seemed like a contradiction in terms. This is very strange, Korth said finally. Humans appear weak because they do not seek dominance, but their weakness produces strength. This is confusing. Maybe, Amy suggested gently, strength and weakness aren't always what they appear to be. Outside the lab windows, the stars wheeled silently through space, indifferent to the cultural revolution taking place on the research station. Humanity was teaching the galaxy a new way to think about conflict and cooperation, one puzzled alien scientist at a time. But in the depths of space, ancient systems watched and judged, following protocols that had been written when the galaxy was young. And those systems were beginning to notice that something had changed in the cosmic order. Intelligence analyst Alex Ford stared at the data streams flowing across his screens and felt his blood turn cold. 6 months of careful investigation had led to this moment, and he wished desperately that he had been wrong. The office around him was quiet except for the hum of computers processing information from 1,000 different sources across the galaxy. Charts covered every wall, showing trade routes, communication patterns, and the locations of ancient ruins that most species had forgotten existed. Dr. Helen Moore looked up from her own workstation, her face pale in the blue light of the displays. As Earth's leading expert on galactic history, she had spent weeks cross-referencing Alex's intelligence reports with archaeological data. The picture they had assembled was terrifying. "Alex, I've confirmed it," she said quietly. The Kepler, civilization, the Harmony States, the Peaceful Coalition, all of them disappeared from galactic records within 50 years of achieving lasting peace. Alex nodded grimly. And always the same pattern. First, they stop participating in the ritual conflicts. Then their technology stops advancing. Finally, all communication ceases and their worlds go dark. He pulled up a star chart showing the locations of dead civilizations, red dots scattered across the galaxy like droplets of blood, each one representing a species that had vanished without explanation. 23 advanced civilizations, Alex continued. All gone. The official records claim they transcended to higher planes of existence or chose isolation for spiritual growth. But the real data tells a different story. Helen activated a holographic display that showed the timeline of galactic history. Look at this pattern. Every species that survives long-term maintains some form of ongoing conflict. Not real war, mind you, but formal disputes, territorial challenges, ritualized combat. It's like the galaxy has rules that nobody talks about. Because they don't know the rules exist, Alex said. He called up another set of files, these ones, marked with the highest security classifications. Helen, what I'm about to show you changes everything. The hologram shifted to display technical schematics that hurt to look at. The technology was clearly alien, but not from any known species. The designs were ancient, elegant, and somehow wrong in ways that made Alex's skin crawl. I found these buried in the archaeological data from 12 different dead worlds, Alex explained. They're all identical, monitoring stations built by a species that died out millions of years ago. And Helen, they're still active. Helen leaned forward, studying the schematics. Active how? They're watching, measuring, judging. Alex highlighted sections of the ancient designs. Near as I can tell, they evaluate species based on their response to challenge and conflict. Any civilization that becomes too peaceful gets marked for something called pacification protocols. Which means what exactly? Alex called up another file, this one containing intercepted transmissions from deep space. The signals were old, automatic, and broadcast on frequencies that most modern species ignored. Best guess? Complete technological suppression. The monitoring systems have the capability to shut down advanced technology across entire star systems. They can make a civilization forget how to build starships, how to use quantum computers, even how to generate power beyond the most basic levels. Helen sat back in her chair, the implications hitting her. They're keeping the galaxy in a state of controlled conflict. Not enough war to destroy civilization, but enough aggression to satisfy whatever criteria they're using to judge species worthiness. Exactly. And Helen, there's more. Alex's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Scout Captain Tony Nash reported something 3 days ago. The monitoring stations are starting to show increased activity. Increased how? Power surges. New signal patterns. It's like they're waking up from a long sleep. Alex pulled up Tony's reconnaissance data, showing energy readings from monitoring stations across the galaxy. I think our presence is triggering something. The way humans behave, our approach to conflict resolution, it's outside their programmed parameters. Helen studied the data with growing alarm. How many of these monitoring stations are there? Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. They're hidden in asteroid fields, buried on dead moons, built into the structure of space stations that everyone thinks are natural formations. Alex highlighted location after location on the galactic map. They've been watching every species in the galaxy for millions of years, and now they're paying attention to us. More than paying attention, I think they're preparing to act. Helen stood up and began pacing, her mind racing through the implications. We need to warn Earth. If these systems decide that humanity is too peaceful, they could shut down our entire civilization. It gets worse, Alex said quietly. I've been monitoring galactic communication networks. Word is spreading about human pacification techniques. Other species are starting to notice that wherever humans go, conflicts get resolved instead of escalated. He showed her intercept reports from alien intelligence services. The translations were rough, but the meaning was clear. Multiple species had begun investigating human activities, trying to understand how humans consistently avoided the ritual conflicts that other civilizations considered necessary. They think we're using some kind of advanced weapon, Helen said, reading through the reports. A weapon that makes enemies want to cooperate instead of fight. From their perspective, it's the most terrifying form of warfare imaginable. Helen stopped pacing and turned to face Alex. What if they're right? What do you mean? Think about it. Humans do have a weapon that other species don't understand. We genuinely believe that most conflicts can be resolved through negotiation and compromise. In a galaxy where everyone expects dominance hierarchies and ritualized combat, that belief system is completely alien. Alex considered this. So we're accidentally conducting psychological warfare just by being ourselves? Accidentally, yes, but effectively. Helen called up the data showing human success rates in resolving interspecies disputes. Look at these numbers. In 6 months, human mediators have prevented 14 major conflicts and resolved 37 ongoing territorial disputes. The galaxy hasn't been this peaceful in recorded history, and that's exactly what will trigger the monitoring systems, Alex said grimly. They stood in silence for a moment, absorbing the implications. Humanity had stumbled into a trap that had been set millions of years ago. By being peaceful, they had marked themselves and potentially the entire galaxy for technological suppression. We need to contact General Patricia Stone, Helen said finally. If there's any hope of dealing with this, we'll need every human ship in the galaxy working together. Alex nodded and began encrypting the data for transmission to Earth. Helen, there's one more thing. The monitoring systems aren't just watching for peace. They're also evaluating adaptive responses to challenges. Meaning if we can figure out how to satisfy their criteria without resorting to meaningless conflict, we might be able to rewrite the rules that have controlled the galaxy for millions of years. Helen looked at the star charts showing all the dead civilizations, all the species that had failed this ancient test. And if we can't? Alex didn't answer immediately. He was thinking about the monitoring stations powering up across the galaxy, about ancient machines preparing to judge humanity, by standards written when Earth was still cooling. Then we become red dot number 24, he said quietly. Outside their office, the galaxy continued its elaborate dance of ritualized conflict, unaware that the rules governing their behavior were about to change forever. In the depths of space, ancient systems calculated probabilities and prepared protocols that hadn't been used in millennia. The test was coming, and humanity didn't even know they were taking it. Systems analyst Maya Chen worked through her third sleepless night in a row, surrounded by empty coffee cups and displays showing code that shouldn't exist. The precursor monitoring protocols were unlike anything in human computer science, but slowly, piece by piece, she was beginning to understand how they worked. Her office deep inside Earth's strategic command center buzzed with activity. Dozens of specialists worked at terminals around her, all focused on the same impossible task. They had 3 weeks to decode millions of years of alien programming before the monitoring systems finished their evaluation of humanity. "Maya, I think I found something," called Dr. Eric Walsh from across the room. He was Earth's leading expert on artificial intelligence, pulled from his research to help crack the precursor code. Maya looked up from her screens, her eyes burning from staring at alien symbols for hours. "What do you have?" "The monitoring systems aren't actually looking for violence," Eric said, his voice carrying excitement. "They're looking for complexity, adaptive responses to challenges. The problem is every species in the galaxy has been misinterpreting the requirements." Maya walked over to Eric's workstation, where he had managed to decode part of the evaluation matrix used by the monitoring systems. The mathematics were elegant and terrifying in their scope. "Look at this," Eric continued, highlighting sections of code. "The original precursors programmed these systems to identify species capable of genuine growth and adaptation. War was just one possible response to challenge, not the required response. Then why does every peaceful species get marked for pacification? Because their peace was passive. They stopped facing challenges, stopped growing, stopped adapting. The monitoring systems interpreted that as evolutionary failure." Maya studied the code, her programmer's mind working through the logic. "So the systems aren't evil. They're trying to preserve species that can continue to evolve." "Exactly. But millions of years of operation with no updates have created bugs in their evaluation routines. They've started to see any form of peace as evolutionary stagnation." Across the room, Captain Luke Adams finished a secure communication with his fleet commanders scattered across the galaxy. For the past 2 weeks, human ships had been quietly moving into position near critical monitoring stations, all while maintaining the appearance of normal exploration activities. "Maya, Eric," Luke called out. "We're getting reports from our teams in the field. The pattern is clear now. Every time humans resolve a conflict through negotiation, the local monitoring stations increase their activity levels." Maya felt her heart sink. "We're making it worse." "Not necessarily," Eric said quickly. "Look at the data more carefully. Yes, the stations are powering up, but they're not following standard pacification protocols. They're running evaluation subroutines that haven't been active in millennia." He pulled up readings from monitoring stations across the galaxy. Instead of the simple binary assessment that had doomed peaceful species in the past, the ancient machines were performing complex analyses of human behavior. "They're confused," Maya realized. "We don't fit their programming." "Which gives us an opportunity," Luke said. "My teams are in position near 47 monitoring stations. If you can figure out how to communicate with these things, we might be able to update their evaluation criteria." Maya turned back to her code analysis with renewed focus. The precursor programming language was based on mathematical concepts that human science was only beginning to understand, but she was starting to see patterns in the chaos. "Eric, look at this section," she said, pointing to a complex subroutine. "This looks like it's designed to accept input from evaluated species. The precursors built in a way for civilizations to communicate directly with the monitoring systems." "A test interface," Eric said, his eyes widening. "Species that figured out how to talk to the monitors could potentially redefine the evaluation parameters. But none of the galaxy's current species even know the monitoring systems exist. Because the species that did figure it out either passed the test and moved beyond the need for monitoring or failed and were pacified out of existence." Maya felt the pieces clicking together in her mind. The precursors didn't want to control the galaxy forever. They wanted to create a system that would eventually be replaced by something better. And we might be the first species in millions of years capable of building that replacement. Captain Luke walked over to join their discussion. What do you need from my fleet? Access to the monitoring stations, Maya said. Not to destroy them, but to interface with them. If I'm right, we can teach them to recognize cooperation and problem-solving as forms of adaptive behavior. How long do you need? Maya looked at the vast amount of code still waiting to be deciphered. With the current team, 6 months minimum. We don't have 6 months. The Galactic intelligence networks are reporting increased monitoring station activity across all sectors. Some species are starting to panic. Eric stood up suddenly. Maya, what if we don't need to understand all the code? What if we just need to demonstrate human problem-solving capabilities directly to the monitoring systems? What do you mean? Instead of trying to reprogram them, we show them what human adaptive behavior looks like. Let them evaluate us in real time while we solve actual problems. Maya considered this approach. It was risky, but it might work faster than trying to decode millions of years of accumulated programming. We'd need to coordinate across multiple star systems simultaneously, she said. Show the monitoring network that human cooperation scales, from individual interactions all the way up to galactic-level problem-solving. Luke activated his communication system. I can coordinate fleet movements. What kind of demonstration did you have in mind? Dr. Karen White entered the command center carrying reports from her cultural exchange programs. She had been working with alien species across the galaxy, trying to explain human cooperation methods. I might have an idea, she said, overhearing their conversation. What if we solve a problem that's been troubling the galaxy for centuries? Something big enough that every monitoring station will notice, but complex enough to demonstrate genuine human adaptive capability. Such as? Maya asked. Karen displayed data from her cultural studies. The Meridian trade dispute. 5 different species have been locked in a territorial conflict over mining rights for 300 years. It's the oldest ongoing ritual war in the galaxy. Everyone expects it to continue forever. And if humans could resolve it, it would demonstrate that our methods work on problems that the galaxy considers unsolvable. More importantly, it would show the monitoring systems that cooperation can achieve results that conflict cannot. Maya felt excitement building. We could coordinate the solution across multiple star systems, show the monitoring network that human problem-solving methods scale up to any level of complexity. Eric was already working on implementation details. If we time it right, we can demonstrate human capabilities to every monitoring station simultaneously. One galaxy-wide proof that cooperation is a superior adaptive strategy. Luke activated his fleet communication system. All ships, this is command. Prepare for Operation Silent Victory. We're going to solve a 300-year-old problem so quietly that the galaxy won't realize peace has broken out until it's already happened. Maya turned back to her code analysis with new purpose. They didn't need to understand every detail of the precursor programming. They just needed to speak to it in the language it was designed to recognize. Successful adaptation to complex challenges. Across the galaxy, human ships moved into position like pieces on a chessboard that spanned star systems. But unlike every other species in galactic history, humans weren't preparing to fight for their survival. They were preparing to think their way out of a trap that had been set before their planet had evolved complex life. And they were going to do it so elegantly that the ancient machines would have no choice but to recognize cooperation as the ultimate form of strength. The demonstration was about to begin. Xenobiologist Dr. Frank Miller stood on the observation deck of the research station Harmony and watched the impossible happen below. The ancient monitoring system hung in space like a metallic spider, its surface covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. For 3 million years it had watched this sector of space, judging species and enforcing rules that nobody understood. Now it was dying. Frank, you need to see this, called engineer Rachel Adams from the control room. Her voice carried a note of panic that made Frank's stomach clench. He had been studying the monitoring systems for weeks, trying to understand their degradation patterns, But nothing had prepared him for what was happening now. Frank rushed to the control room where Rachel stood surrounded by displays showing system failures cascading across the galaxy. Red warning lights covered every screen, each one representing a monitoring station going offline. "How many have we lost?" Frank asked. 47 in the last 6 hours, Rachel replied grimly. "The degradation is accelerating. These systems have been running for millions of years without maintenance, and our interference seems to have triggered some kind of cascade failure." Frank studied the data streaming across the monitors. The ancient technology was failing faster than anyone had predicted. Worse, the failures weren't random. They were following a pattern that suggested the monitoring network was trying to implement emergency protocols before it died completely. "Rachel, what are those energy spikes?" "That's what scares me. Every time a monitoring station goes offline, it sends out a massive burst of electromagnetic energy. If I didn't know better, I'd say they were trying to communicate with something." Frank, felt cold dread settle in his stomach. Communicate with what? Before Rachel could answer, alerts began sounding throughout the station. Admiral Steve Collins's voice came through the communication system, carrying news that Frank had been dreading. "All stations, this is Central Command. We have confirmed reports of monitoring systems across the galaxy entering emergency protocols. The Galactic Confederation has called an emergency assembly. Every species is preparing for immediate warfare." Frank and Rachel exchanged glances. This was exactly what they had been trying to prevent. "Sir," Frank said into his communicator, "the monitoring systems aren't trying to start a war. They're trying to prevent total system failure. The energy bursts are attempting to upload core protocols to backup systems." "Backup systems?" Admiral Collins's voice carried confusion. "Frank, what backup systems?" Rachel pulled up long-range sensor data that made Frank's blood turn cold. Scattered throughout the galaxy, ancient installations that had been dormant for millions of years were beginning to power up. Structures built into asteroids, hidden within gas giant atmospheres, buried deep in planetary cores. The precursors didn't just build monitoring stations, Frank said quietly. They built an entire network, and when the primary systems fail, the backup network activates automatically. What does that mean for us? Frank studied the activation patterns spreading across the galaxy like a virus. It means we have about 18 hours before every backup monitoring system comes online, and these backup systems are designed to implement total pacification protocols immediately. How total are we talking about? Complete technological shutdown across all inhabited systems. The backups don't have the sophisticated evaluation routines of the primary monitors. They just see failure of the monitoring network as proof that the galaxy needs to be reset to a pre-technological state. Rachel was working frantically at her control station, trying to establish communication links with human ships across the galaxy. "Frank, I'm getting reports that alien fleets are mobilizing everywhere. The Vorthans are preparing for what they call the Final Honor War. The Crystalline Hive is activating battle formations they haven't used in centuries. They think the only way to satisfy the monitoring systems is through massive conflict," Frank realized. "They're going to try to prove their worthiness through the biggest war in galactic history." "And it won't work," Rachel said grimly. "The backup systems won't care about ritual combat. They'll see large-scale warfare as proof that the galaxy needs to be pacified immediately." Frank activated his communication system and began broadcasting to human ships across the galaxy. "All human vessels, this is Dr. Frank Miller. We need to implement emergency protocols now. The monitoring network is collapsing and taking the galaxy with it." Captain Julie Ross responded first from her position near the Meridian system. "Frank, we're seeing massive alien fleet movements here. The species involved in the trade dispute are abandoning negotiations and preparing for total war. Julie, you can't let that happen. If even one major conflict starts, it will trigger the backup systems to activate pacification protocols across the entire galaxy. What do you want us to do? We have 40 human ships scattered across 12 star systems, and we're facing alien fleets with thousands of vessels." Frank looked at Rachel, seeing his own desperation reflected in her eyes. They had discovered the solution to the galaxy's ancient trap, only to watch it collapse before they could implement it. "We stick to the plan," Frank said finally. "But we accelerate everything. Instead of demonstrating human cooperation over months, we do it in hours. How? By solving every major conflict in the galaxy simultaneously, while the aliens are distracted by preparations for war. Rachel stared at him. Frank, that's impossible. We don't have enough ships, enough people, enough resources. We don't need resources, Frank said, his mind racing through possibilities. We need information. Every human ship has been quietly studying the conflicts in their assigned sectors. We know what the real problems are behind every ritual war in the galaxy. He activated the galaxy-wide communication network that humans had been building in, secret for months. Ship after ship responded, their captains reporting ready for immediate action. All ships, this is Frank Miller coordinating from Research Station Harmony. Operation Silent Victory is now active. You have 18 hours to resolve every conflict in your assigned sectors before the backup monitoring systems come online. Sir, came a voice from the Kepler sector. The Thrakari and Zephyrian fleets are already engaging in preliminary combat. How do we stop a war that's already started? Frank thought about everything they had learned about human problem-solving, about the alien confusion over cooperation, about the ancient systems that judged species based on their ability to adapt and grow. You don't stop the war, he said quietly. You solve the problems that caused it. Find out what they're really fighting over and fix it while they're busy shooting at each other. Across the galaxy, human ships began moving with purpose that had nothing to do with combat. While alien fleets prepared for the greatest war in galactic history, humans quietly went to work on the underlying issues that had made that war seem necessary. Dr. Marcus Gray coordinated supply deliveries to regions suffering from resource shortages. Captain Lisa Park used human technology to restore damaged ecosystems that had sparked territorial disputes. Engineer Sam Torres and his team began sharing human innovations that made contested resources unnecessary. Frank, Rachel said, watching data streams from across the galaxy. It's working. Conflicts are being resolved faster than the aliens can escalate them to full warfare. But Frank was watching the countdown timer showing how long they had before the backup systems activated. 18 hours had become 12, then 6, then 3. It's not fast enough, he said quietly. We're solving problems, but the backup systems are going to activate before we can demonstrate our success to the monitoring network. Rachel looked at him with sudden understanding. Unless we communicate directly with the backup systems as they come online. How? The same way we plan to update the primary monitors. We show them what human adaptive behavior looks like in real time. Frank realized what she was suggesting. A live demonstration. As each backup system activates, we immediately prove that the galaxy doesn't need to be pacified because it's already being healed. We'll need perfect timing, Rachel warned. And we'll need every human ship in the galaxy working in perfect coordination. Frank looked out at the stars, where human vessels were already proving that the galaxy's oldest conflicts could be solved without anyone firing a shot. Humanity had spent months being misunderstood by aliens who couldn't comprehend cooperation. Now they had hours to make their case to machines that had been programmed to judge civilizations before Earth had developed language. All ships, Frank, broadcast across the galaxy. Prepare for synchronized demonstration. We're going to show the universe what human strength really looks like. The first backup monitoring system came online in the Vega sector at exactly 14:32 Galactic Standard Time. Captain Julie Ross watched from the bridge of her ship as the ancient machine emerged from its hiding place within an asteroid field, its surface crackling with energy that had been dormant for 3 million years. All human vessels, this is Julie Ross coordinating the final demonstration. She broadcast across the galaxy. The backup systems are activating. Begin immediate problem resolution in your assigned sectors. Across 12 star systems, human ships moved into action with precision that would have impressed any military commander. But these weren't military maneuvers. Captain Mike Chen diverted water from an abundant system to drought-stricken colonies, solving a resource dispute that had lasted 2 centuries. Engineer Lisa Park activated terraforming equipment that would make contested planets suitable for multiple species. Dr. Amy Foster shared medical technology, that eliminated diseases that had sparked quarantine conflicts. The backup monitoring system in Vega began its evaluation protocols, scanning the sector for signs of civilizational failure. What it found defied every parameter in its ancient programming. Where its sensors expected to detect warfare, they instead registered massive resource redistribution that benefited all parties. Where combat should have been raging, the system detected complex engineering projects that expanded available living space. Where territorial disputes should have been escalating, it found species working together on solutions that gave everyone more than they had demanded originally. Dr. Marcus Gray watched the monitoring system's confusion from his position aboard the research vessel Discovery. The ancient machine was running evaluation routines that hadn't been used since the precursor era, trying to categorize behavior that didn't match any known pattern. "It's working," Marcus reported to the human fleet. "The backup system is classifying our activities as novel adaptive behavior. It's not triggering pacification protocols, but across the galaxy, more backup systems were coming online every minute." In the Centauri cluster, alien fleets had begun their ritual combat just as the monitoring station activated. The ancient machine detected large-scale warfare and immediately began charging weapons that could sterilize entire star systems. Captain David Stone and his team arrived in the combat zone just as the monitoring system prepared to fire. Instead of trying to stop the alien fleets, David implemented a solution that made their fight unnecessary. He deployed atmospheric processors that created new habitable worlds in the disputed system, giving each alien faction more territory than they had been fighting over. The monitoring system paused, its weapons still charging, but its evaluation routines struggling to process what had happened. The conflict had ended not through victory or defeat, but through the sudden abundance of what everyone had wanted. Engineer Rachel Adams coordinated the most complex operation from her position. Near the galactic core, 30 backup monitoring systems were activating simultaneously in the oldest inhabited region of space. This was where the most ancient conflicts burned, disputes that had shaped galactic culture for millions of years. "All ships in the core sectors," Rachel broadcast, "initiate simultaneous problem resolution. We need to solve 30 conflicts in the next 10 minutes. What followed was the most remarkable display of coordinated problem-solving in galactic history. Human ships appeared at conflict zones across the core sectors, not with weapons, but with solutions. They brought new technologies that made scarce resources abundant. They offered medical advances that eliminated genetic incompatibilities between species. They provided engineering expertise that allowed hostile environments to support multiple civilizations. The monitoring systems detected the coordinated nature of the response and began communicating with each other through quantum channels that spanned the galaxy. Ancient artificial intelligences that had operated in isolation for millions of years suddenly found themselves sharing data about a species that solved problems faster than conflicts could escalate. Dr. Frank Miller watched the data streams from his research station and felt hope for the first time in weeks. "The backup systems are updating their evaluation criteria in real time," he reported. "They're learning to recognize cooperation as a superior adaptive strategy." But the most critical test was still coming. In the Meridian system, the galaxy's oldest territorial dispute was about to become its final battlefield. 5 alien fleets had gathered to settle a mining rights conflict that had burned for 300 years. Every species in the galaxy was watching, expecting this ancient war to finally reach its conclusion. Captain Luke Adams arrived in the Meridian system as the alien fleets took combat positions. The backup monitoring system in this sector was the largest and most sophisticated, designed to oversee conflicts in the galaxy's most important region. Instead of trying to prevent the battle, Luke implemented a solution that had taken human engineers months to design. He activated a stellar engineering array that converted the disputed asteroid field into a processing facility that produced more valuable materials than the original asteroids had contained. Then he shared the technology freely with all 5 alien factions. The monitoring system detected the resolution of a 300-year conflict in less than 30 minutes. Its evaluation routines, designed to judge species based on their response to challenges, classified this as the most sophisticated adaptive behavior it had ever observed. Across the galaxy, backup monitoring systems began broadcasting a new signal. Instead of preparing pacification protocols, they transmitted updated evaluation criteria that recognized cooperation, resource sharing, and collaborative problem-solving as the highest forms of evolutionary development. Admiral Steve Collins received reports from human ships throughout the galaxy, all sectors reporting successful conflict resolution, he announced. The backup monitoring systems have accepted human problem-solving methods as proof of adaptive superiority. Dr. Helen Moore analyzed the long-term implications from Earth's Strategic Command Center. The monitoring systems are updating their core programming, she reported. They're learning to encourage cooperation instead of conflict. This will change the galaxy's culture permanently. Captain Julie Ross stood on her bridge and watched the Vega monitoring system power down its weapons and begin broadcasting new signals. Instead of judging species based on their capacity for war, it now evaluated them based on their ability to solve problems and work together. All human vessels, she broadcast, mission accomplished. The galaxy has learned a new definition of strength. Across the stars, alien fleets found themselves in the strange position of having nothing left to fight about. The humans had resolved their conflicts so quietly and efficiently that peace had broken out while everyone was preparing for war. Some aliens were confused, others were grateful, but all of them were beginning to understand that cooperation might be more powerful than conquest. The monitoring systems continued their ancient vigil, but now they watched for signs of collaboration instead of combat. They measured innovation instead of aggression. They encouraged growth through cooperation rather than dominance through conflict. And in the silence between the stars, humanity's greatest victory went largely unnoticed by those it had saved. The galaxy continued to turn. The species continued to grow and explore and dream. But now they did so in a universe where the ancient machines rewarded the builders instead of the warriors. Humans had sat in silence while the galaxy called it war. In the end, they had won by changing the very definition of victory. They had conquered an empire of conflict by teaching it how to build an empire of peace. And they had done it so quietly that most of the galaxy never realized they had been saved. The war was over. The peace had just begun.